Hello, it's Professor Milsom. Just want to do a quick overview for you on how do I read fiction. Give you some of my tips. Make sure you're taking notes, and all the terminology I'm going to share here you need to know and you can use when you write about fiction. Without further ado, basics of fiction. So what should I know about fiction? I'm going to just throw out a bunch of terms for you. You probably have heard some of these, most of these. Fiction is a narrative or a story that's not totally factual. It might be based on facts, might have facts in it, but it's a made-up story. In general, what we're going to cover in this class, in terms of fiction, we're going to cover short stories later on and read a few novels. Novels tend to be long books. Castle of Otranto, for instance, or Northanger Abbey are short novels. You could call them novellas. Frankenstein also is not that long. We classify fiction into different genres. Genre is a word from French that means like type, or it's a category. So some examples of genre are horror, sci-fi, romance, crime, fantasy. Gothic is a genre. Realism, chick lit, street fiction. I mean, you could just keep going. And these aren't all discrete or separate. They often overlap. So these are just convenient ways of designating like flavors of novel genres. Here's some more terminology. What should I pay attention to while reading a novel in this class or in general? So, again, these are things you've probably heard. You should pay attention to the plot. What's happening? There's always an introduction, rising action, where stuff starts to happen. Look for a climax, like the big moment when everything comes together or falls apart. And then the conclusion. You're going to pay attention to characters, some terminology. Oh, my dog is yawning. Some terminology you need to know. There's protagonists. Think of them as like the good guys or the main characters. You've got the antagonists, which you can think of as the bad guys or characters. You've got minor characters, so people who come in and out aren't that important. Pay attention to the relationships between the characters. And characters, when they talk to each other, those are called dialogues, obviously conversations. Another thing to pay attention to is the setting, the places, the environments, what kinds of atmospheres are set up. Always very important. Pay attention to themes. Themes are basically recurring or repeated ideas, patterns, or topics that come up over and over again throughout a novel or story. You also, just as in poetry, which also has these things as well. Pay attention to the imagery, descriptions that appeal to the senses. Then you'll have imagery like metaphors, similes, personifications. I refer you to the Prosody Handbook for more information about these things. And then finally, and most importantly, what's the meaning? So what's the book communicating? What's the point? This is not obvious or direct always. If the purpose of a book is to tell you that women are vulnerable to predatory men, this is a theme we're going to see throughout this semester. Why doesn't the author just say, "Hey, by the way, women are vulnerable"? Why don't they just write that down and move on with it? Why are they creating a whole book about it? Why are they telling a story? Got to find out what that point is. It's not always obvious or direct. Okay, so 3. What is my job as a scholar of fiction? We talked about what your job is as a scholar of poetry. Now, fiction. So what do? You keep track as you're reading. You have to keep track of plot, characters, setting, themes, imagery, and meaning, all those things from the last page. And to do that, I suggest you make a character list as you go along. Write chapter summaries, like a couple sentences at the end of each chapter, always helps. Draw maps Maps help me visually to understand things. And then as you're reading, obviously, you underline and annotate any images you see. I can't emphasize this enough. I know a lot of us immediately just Google character lists, SparkNotes, eNotes, Shmoop. All these sites have convenient character lists. But if you're doing that, it's going to be less helpful to you, because if you make it yourself, it'll have a lot more meaning. Creating it yourself takes longer, but I guarantee you'll get more out of it. You'll become a better reader, which is the whole point of this anyway. Okay, next, as your next job is to notice patterns. This is the same as in poetry. Pay attention when things repeat themselves, like repeated imagery. Is there always a storm cloud, or does a bird fly across, the scene? Does a character repeat the same language, or is there a repeated language in a particular kind of setting that always occurs? Authors use these repetitions and break the repetition also to make a point. So you're noticing the words, the phrases, and the style. So look for patterns. It's general advice when you're reading literature. And then, as usual, this is how you get into analysis. Pay attention to anything weird, and I'm warning you, everything we're reading is going to have weird stuff. This is going to be a recurring thing, like anything strange, contradictions, surprises, confusing parts, unexpected events or phrases. Anything weird, make a note of it. That's always a good thing to write about in an essay. Okay, so I'll just give you some examples. What I do as a reader. Personal tip. I always put character lists at the end of my books and write the first page where each character appears. Sorry it's messy, this is my handwriting, but this is my character list at the back of Castle of Otranto. So you have Manfred, Matilda, Conrad, Isabella, Hippolyta. Those are all the main characters introduced on page 17, and then you can see I keep track as I go along. So always read with a pen or pencil. Another thing I like to do is draw character and plot maps. So for instance, in Castle of Otranto, we have a few settings. We've got the actual castle here, which is Otranto. We've got a church over here, and there's like an underground tunnel. This is the underground tunnel. And then you can see I've drawn a few lines to indicate relationships, like Manfred is married to Hippolyta, but, they're not really in love anymore. Their daughter is Matilda. She was supposed to marry Conrad, but he gets crushed by a helmet. This happens on the first page. I'm not ruining anything for anyone. Bianca's her servant. She falls in love with a peasant. So anyway, you can see this helps me understand the relationships between everyone and where they fall in terms of the setting. Finally, here's what I expect you to do while you read. I expect you to track the characters, look up all the words you don't know. They could be on a quiz. And I'm warning you, some books have a lot of words you don't know, and so it takes time and it's slow. But if you find something hard, this is the trick. You have to look things up and then reread them. You got to annotate any imagery you find and answer the plot questions to turn in. So whenever I'm teaching books, especially long, hard books, this is the key. These questions are annoying, but they help you. All my students always say, oh, this is so annoying, but if I didn't do this, I wouldn't have understood. And I'm warning you again, don't waste your time reading too much on the internet. If you stick to this and you read it, you'll find that you'll understand better. So here are the instructions, and this goes for every book we read. I'll give you a set of questions for each chapter. Instructions are answer the questions in complete sentences, so not one word. Do not just copy the answers from the book. Use your own words. This is how I can tell if you understand the meaning or not. If you have to use a quotation in your answer, use as little as possible and put the quotation in quotation marks. I can't stress this enough, because if it's not in your own words, then I can't tell if you understand it. Please type your answers. Please number each answer. do not include the question. So you should write the answer in such a way that the question you're answering is obvious. If you don't do these things, I'm not going to grade it because it makes it way too hard and I have too many to grade. I know that sounds harsh, but I just have so many to grade that if it's unclear or not done this way, I can't spend time like searching for it. Okay, so for instance, look at the example. In your own words, there's number 1 for Castle of Otranto. What is the prophecy about Manfred's family? Page 17. Now, if you don't have the Oxford edition, like I requested on the syllabus, or you're using the online version, that's fine. It's just you're not gonna have the help of the page numbers, which is okay. Just you'll find it. It's like the first few pages. So a correct answer. In your own words, what is the prophecy about Manfred's family? The prophecy about Manfred's family. When you answer a question in a complete sentence, the trick is to just use some of the words from the question. So what is the prophecy? The prophecy about Manfred's family is that its real owners will return when they get too large for it, and the current occupants will lose possession of the castle. This is a good answer because it's written in my own words and it uses as few quotations as possible, and it is a complete sentence. Here's the incorrect answer. The castle should pass from the present owners. This is a bad example because it doesn't include what the question is asking, and it is mostly a direct quote from the text. I cannot tell if the writer understands the book. So the castle should pass from the present owners. Yeah, that doesn't really explain anything. So you really have to find the stuff on the page, think about it, and then answer it. This takes a long time. There's no way to cheat on this. If you have questions or you don't understand an answer, there's going to be a discussion board thread where you can all go and help each other. So let's use that as we read these books, because they're all going to be difficult, but with a little support and giving yourself enough time, then you'll be able to do this. All right, let me know if you have any questions. As always, you can email me, and I hope you're doing well.